Thanks for tuning into the Jurassic Park-Cast, the Jurassic Park podcast where guests chat with me about Michael Crichton's 1990 novel Jurassic Park, and also not that too. A big shout out to Christoph Oakes of Snail, and a big thank you to him for letting me use his band's music to score this podcast. You can find his music on Spotify and Bandcamp, and today's intro is from the song Late Bloomer, and our outro is Grow Old or Don't. And they're both from his debut album, Snail. Alright, in this excerpt from episode 39, Lex, I report on an academic paper that addresses the subject of Tyrannosaur vision, and we can relate it to how Tyrannosaur vision is portrayed in Michael Crichton's 1990 novel, Jurassic Park. To start, the world's leading expert on avian care and Jurassic Park's veterinarian Dr. Harding says, on page 202, quote, "They, meaning the apatosaurs, probably wouldn't react. Dinosaurs have excellent visual acuity, but they have a basic amphibian visual system. It's attuned to movement. They don't see unmoving things well at all." Now later, while observing a Maiasaura, Grant and Lex see, on pages 261 and 262, quote, "It really can't see us when we don't move. After a minute, it literally forgets that we're here." This was just like the Tyrannosaur, referring to the Tyrannosaur attack earlier, another classic example of an amphibian visual cortex. Studies of frogs had shown that amphibians only saw moving things, like insects. If something didn't move, they literally didn't see it. The same thing seemed to be true of dinosaurs. We reviewed a paper on the amphibian visual cortex in episode 47, The Park, called, quote, "What the Frog's Eye Tells the Frog's Brain." That paper concludes, "The operations of a frog's eye have, quote, much more the flavor of perception than of sensation, if that distinction has any meaning now. That is to say that the language in which they are best described is the language of complex abstractions from the visual image. We have been tempted, the authors are, for example, to call the convexity detectors bug perceivers. Such a fiber responds best when a dark object, smaller than a receptive field, enters that field, stops, and moves about intermittently thereafter. Think of like a bug. The response is not affected if the light changes or if the background, like the picture of grass or flowers, is moving, and is not there if only the background, moving or still, is in the field. Could one better describe a system for detecting an accessible bug?" they ask. So the amphibian visual cortex, as described by Grant, mimics the findings in this old paper, that visually one using this visual system, here it's a Tyrannosaur and a Maiasaura, and in the paper it's frogs, responds best when a dark object smaller than the receptive field enters that field, stops, and moves about intermittently thereafter. Alright, that's a lot of preamble to say this. This is where Michael Crichton is coming from when he's writing Jurassic Park, but the truth of the matter on Tyrannosaur vision is actually much closer, in reality, outside the mythos of the novel, to what was presented in a new section of episode 39. Here's the clip. The second story we got here, also going back to episode 34, The Main Road, we were introduced to the amphibian visual cortex of Tyrannosaurs that meant that Dr. Alan Grant could hide from the big Rex by remaining still. The novel says that the Tyrannosaur tracks its prey based on movement, and if you don't move, you are invisible. We know this isn't true today, and I found the paper that refutes this about as strongly as can be. Published in 2008, the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology published the article Binocular Vision in Theropod Dinosaurs, aimed to investigate what a theropod's vision might be like. With sculpted life reconstructions of 7 theropod heads and techniques adopted from ophthalmic field perimetry, the authors reconstructed, measured, calculated, and evaluated the vision of a few theropods including Allosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, Daspletosaurus, Tyrannosaurus, Nanotyrannus, Velociraptor, and Troodon. Allosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus were said to be restricted to binocular vision to a region only approximately 20 degrees wide, similar to modern crocodiles, for example. The Daspletosaurus, Tyrannosaurus, Nanotyrannus, Velociraptor, and Troodon offered a broader binocular field between 45 and 60 degrees in width, similar to modern raptorial birds. They compared how these visual fields influence a carnivore's predatory style, either ambush or pursuit, and what cranial adaptations which enhance binocular vision might suggest. Quote, "The progressive increase in frontal vision in the tyrannosaurids culminates in broader binocular overlap than that of a modern hawk," says the paper, which is a conclusion that they based on modern reptilian and avian models. The most interesting to me, and I had to laugh at this, is that the paper sort of has a go at Dr. Jack Horner's scavenger-based Tyrannosaurus theory. Quote, "Doubt has been cast on the predatory capability of Tyrannosaurus rex," says the paper, and then it name-checks Horner's 3 papers from 1993, 1994, and 1997, and specifically notes that the eyes were characterized as, quote, "beady," and thereby inappropriate for detecting distant prey. And while these papers were yet to be published at the time of Jurassic Park in 1990, see, it's possible that this unpublished sentiment may have been circulating at the time, and thus Crichton adopted it into his narrative. However, this paper, as I said, name-checks Horner 3 times, and they specifically call attention to the characterization of its eye being beady and therefore unfit for pursuit predation, and then does the math and concludes, quote, "It would seem most parsimonious to conclude that the Coelurosaurs included in this study all achieved functional stereopsis and all used the capability for spatially demanding tasks." And that's a sciencey way of saying, given that the skulls had adapted for improved vision as the animals evolved, it would suggest that they were using their vision for spatially demanding tasks, also known to carnivores as hunting, not scavenging. And then the paper ends with a final perfunctory little note that I can't help but think was a final poke at the scavenging Tyrannosaurus argument. Quote, "In particular, due to its great scale and broad frontal vision, Tyrannosaurus rex, of all sighted observers to have ever lived, might have experienced the most spectacular view of the three-dimensional world." The end. Alright, you'll notice this has nothing to do with frog DNA, or rana DNA, or amphibian DNA. The novel indicates that the amphibian visual cortex is like, when we talk about like the lizard part of our brains or whatever, it's just the term which describes how the visual cortex resembles that of amphibians. It's not a byproduct of the cloning process, despite what some may argue. Now you know better when you hear people say something like that, and you can link them to this video if you like to clarify how this is all related in the source text. It has nothing to do with frog DNA or hybrids. It's just the visual system that Crichton envisioned dinosaurs having. Alright, a big thank you to you for tuning in. If you're interested in more of the podcast, you can find it wherever podcasts are. Just look for Jurassic Park-Cast and include those hyphens, or Jurassic Park Podcast, that might work too. And if you like the videos, you can like and subscribe and receive notifications when a new one is available if you want. Alright, there's a lot more to come. Until next time.